Good afternoon, y'all. I stand in front of you, Lyle Wheeler, a humble chairmaker. That's an oxymoron for those who didn't catch that part. As it says in the program, I come from a long line of good old boys and strong women. We've been makers throughout history. Always been makers. Make sure I get what I'm saying. I gotta go back and forth here. We were yeoman farmers and survived by farming. And then we were makers by necessity. We made all kinds of things. Wagons, carriages, buggies, furniture, spinning and weaving equipment, farming implements, all kinds of stuff like that. I can't read my own writing. One line of my history, my lineage, was traced back to the north side of Hadrian's Wall in Scotland by a daughter of the American Revolution, my mama. We have a coat of arms and a tartan. We were the Scots. There's a book out there written by Jim Webb, former senator from Virginia. The name of the book is Born Fighting. And it's the history of the Scots and who they are and who they were and who they are today. When Mama traced it back, it was near Lockerbie, Scotland. You all might remember Lockerbie, that's where Pan Am 103 went down. Right by the house, right by the house. It was on the north side of Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall was in history denoted as the extent of the Roman Empire, to denote the extent of the Romans. It was started in like this early 2nd century, like 122 AD. It was not an offensive wall to denote the extent of the Roman Empire. It was a defensive wall to keep those folks from coming back and whipping them. That was as far as the Romans got. No further. You think about that and you think of Braveheart, you know, movie Braveheart, Mel and all them, Robert the Bruce, Mary the Queen of Scots. That's who we were. We got thrown out of Scotland, didn't get along with too many folks, went to Northern Ireland. You've heard of the Troubles, the plantations? Well, it was between the Protestants and the Catholics. We were the Protestants. Still, you can get along with the Roman Catholics. It's a long history, but it's who we are and who we were. We came to America in the late 1600s, early 1700s, some as indentured servants. Came to America, settled in Connecticut and Massachusetts, got into Pennsylvania. Things progressed. We became involved in every major and minor skirmish throughout history. Little thing called the Revolution, got involved with that. Yeah. Finished that out. You ever heard of the Whiskey Rebellion? 1789, 1790? It was the first time they decided they're going to put a tax on what you could make. Homemade liquor, going to tax it. I don't think so. Wasn't a good idea then, not a good idea today. Not a bit. Even George Washington himself had to lead a militia out there to put it down. It took him a while. But it never did succeed. They all scattered before he got there. Hid out. kept making their liquor. Yeah. The name of this talk today is called They Sat on Mountain Chairs. And that comes from a description that Alan Eaton wrote when they decided to form the Southern Highlands Craft Guild. There was a meeting in Penland. Lucy Morgan hosted the meeting. They traveled long distances in arduous conditions. It was in the wintertime, snowed both ways, uphill and down. But the people that were there were Olive Campbell, Miss Morgan, lady that started Crossnore was there. The representation from Arrowmont was there, from Berea, and that's why they decided they're going to form the guild. And the description says they had this arduous trek up there. They got there. Welcome to the. We was in the weaving room. There was a pot-bellied stove, and they sat on mountain chairs. It's in the history of it. Who made those chairs? They were there. Who made them? The Scots-Irish that settled the mountains, that came down the mountain and settled that area, were the first makers and chair makers in that area. They made all kinds of stuff, but they were chair makers too. You heard of Conestoga wagons? Well, they made those wagons. Not there, but in southern Pennsylvania near Lancaster, on the banks of the Conestoga River. That's how they got the name, Conestoga wagons. But they did it by hand. Handmade wagons. Get a good team of horses, put your family in the back, and cross America. A covered wagon, a Conestoga wagon. I have major influence in my work from one of my grandfathers, who was a tool maker, a good tool maker. He finished the 8th grade, back when the 8th grade meant something. Went to work in the family wagon business. And very shortly, 1929, 2030, they're going out of business. Guys like Henry Ford, the Studebaker brothers, Charles Olds, they made the transition from carriages to horseless carriages. The rest of them didn't. They went to work in factories as tool makers, as blacksmiths, as woodworkers, as whatever they needed to do. But it was part of when the folks left the mountains and went to work in the cities at factories. My grandfather had 3 sons. My dad and my uncle were twin brothers. Now the 3rd son came along much later. My grandfather went to work for a company called Ingersoll Rand as a tool maker. They would decide what they wanted to build in that factory, and he would make the tooling to make it happen. Adapt the machinery in the factory to make the tooling to make those pieces happen. Air impact wrenches, air drills, handheld pneumatic tooling. My dad went to work in that same factory, so did my uncle. My uncle went to work in what they called experimental. He'd make the first one. What they want to make, he'd make the very first one. Out of bar stock, just created out of nothing. They get what they wanted, they give it to my grandfather and say, make the tooling to make this thing work, make it run. He'd work on it, make the tooling. They'd hand that to my dad and say, okay, take that out in the factory and make it work. And that's what they did for years, many years. But they were tool makers, tool engineers, and very inventive people. Very inventive. My grandfather had 17 patents to his name. 17 patents. The other brother come along late in life, in their lives. He was an extremely gifted individual. He finished out his career for Lockheed Martin, making the SR-71 Blackbird fly. I have a son. He's a computer and electronics whiz. And this is his son. Okay. This is William. I get emotional about this because that's who I am. When I was first showing Will here how to use a handsaw, he said, "How do you get to be so good?" Well, the saw he was using was my great-grandfather's. So there's 6 of us got a hold of that saw at the same time. When my grandfather come through, by 1930, the chairmaking or the carriage business, the wagon business, is out of business. And less than 50 years later, he saw a man on the moon. We will never see that expansion of technology again. From horse and buggy to a man on the moon in a very short time. And we haven't been back yet. But we're going. We're heading that way. My son got a job a while back and come with this high-tech phone. He's showing it to me. I said, "Well, boy, does that thing spit nickels?" He says, "Almost." I said, "You may not know this, but in '69 we went to the moon and back with less than you're holding in your hand." And we made it. So, the period of history I work in is 1860 to 1890. The tools, technique, and style of chair is all from that period. 1860 to 1890. We'd fought a war, settled our differences, and became the United States of America at that time. It was the height of the best quality hand tools ever made. Ever made. The folks that made them were in New England, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island area, New York, Pennsylvania, and even as far south as Georgia. Some of the names of those tool makers were Stanley Works, New Britain, Connecticut, Brown and Sharp in Providence, Rhode Island, Miller's Falls in Massachusetts, the Stearns Company out of Syracuse, New York, James Swan out of Seymour, Connecticut, A.A. Woods Company was in Atlanta. Stanley still has some production today, and they make some of their tools in England, but the rest of them are gone. They're out of business. They were amazing workers and makers. The Stearns Company in Syracuse, New York, specialized in wagon making tools. Tools that made wagons. Parts and pieces for wagons. Very, very well done tool company. The James Swan Company was in Seymour, Connecticut. And they perfected the process of making alloy steel in the crucible. They could make alloy steel and cast it. It wasn't cast iron, it was cast steel. and adding the alloy elements to make the best quality edge tools ever made. Those processes were picked up and used by some of the other major companies. I search for, collect, and use tools like that all the time. I got a good chance of being the winner. The guy that dives with the most tools wins. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Oh, you're one of those. You're one of those.
Yeah, I'm one of those, yeah. Well, the rule is you get to the flea market, whoever's got the money out gets it. So after a show one time, I'm at a local flea market, and this guy's got a Stanley #2 plane with a corrugated bottom. There might be 100 of those in the world. I've got it in my hands. I said, "Sir, what do you have to have this?" He said, $40. Before I could put it down, and my friend pulled out 2 20s and handed it to him, so I handed him his plane. Guy with the money out gets it. Just remember that part when you're at the flea market. Be prepared to buy. Don't be wasting time fooling around looking at stuff. You're there to buy tools and other things. At that same period of history, 1860 to 1890, up in the early 1900s, and in the same part of the world, there were other makers. Remington, Winchester, Smith & Wesson, Samuel Colt, Mr. Browning. Without them, we'd have never made it. But they were in the same part of the world at the same time. And the thought processes and the ingenuity that made the tools and made what got us here will never be repeated. It's definitely not going to happen in Silicon Valley. It's not going to be there. But the engineering and the ingenuity from that time and the thought process to do it was what made us America. I have a draw knife I use. It's not that one, it's another one. Made by the Greenlee Company. They were in western Massachusetts before they moved to Illinois. So I'm on a trout fishing trip in Montana, 40-some years ago. Flying to Missoula and going around Kalispell, and they'd come back down around about 2 weeks to fish part of Montana. Stop in Plains, Montana at a hardware store. I don't remember why we're there, but we're in this hardware store in Plains, Montana. I'm walking along and there's a brand new Greenlee draw knife. Brand new. It's probably been there 50 or 80 years, a long time, dust on it and all that. And I bought it for $20. But brand new, just sitting there. I was the first one to ever use it. And a tool like that is just a really amazing piece. So, any questions so far? Any thoughts on the matter? We're going to get into chair making now and how these chairs are made. If I'm going along and doing this part, if it's something you don't quite get, ask the question. The only stupid question is the one you don't ask. So if you're not getting it, raise your hand. I'll either answer it right then, or I'll say we're going to get to it in a while. Okay. The material in these chairs, traditional mountain chairs, is red oak, Quercus rubra, native Appalachian hardwoods. We only use native Appalachian hardwoods in all the work that we do. Through our forestry practices, especially in the last 30 and 40 years, in western North Carolina, in this part of the world, we have the greatest abundance, quality, and quantity of hardwoods in the world. Growing right here. We don't need to import exotic woods. If it doesn't grow around here, we're not going to fool with it. We have a great, great quality and quantity of wood. I buy local as much as I can. One of my favorite board stores, dry board stores, is out here in Swannanoa. Bee Tree Hardwoods. BT survived the hurricane, barely. They lost the log yard, they lost the mill, but they had their warehouses. And they were able to keep selling, and they made it through. Others are not so lucky. Where Mitchell Lumber Company used to be in downtown Spruce Pine, it's gone. Completely gone. I bought from Appalachian Lumber Company where I live, right nearby where I live. I'm on the third generation of folks there. I've been there for a long time. But they are purveyors of quality hardwood and house parts, stair treads, newels, risers, molding, things that you see in the interior of a house, besides everything else. That's what they do, the Appalachian Lumber Company. Okay. Back to Quercus rubra, red oak. Linnaean taxonomy brings us down to thing. Kingdom, fauna, class, order, family. Genus, oaks, species, red. Quercus rubra. There's white oaks and red oaks. In the white oak family is all the rounded lobe leaves, makes their acorns every year. Willow oak, overcup oak, post oak, in the white oak family. In the red oak family, there's red oak, black oak, pin oak, chestnut oak, several of them. They have pointed lobe leaves, make their acorns every other year. So that's how we get to the red oak. I choose it to work, and it's traditional wood to use for chairs. Beauty, strength, good quality, good color, good grain pattern. So, I source my materials at sawmills. I buy logs at sawmills. I can go out in the woods and knock one down and haul them. That's a lot of work. I'd rather walk up to a log that's ready to go. And so I have mills that know me, and I go there when they're not operating, and I pick out the log I want, and I can look at 300 or 400 logs, and I'm going to buy just one of them. Just one of them. It's a veneer quality log. It's a perfect log. Veneer quality. They could roll veneer off that thing and make a whole lot of money off it. And so I'm paying that price in the log. The best one they've got. I have 5 criteria that I go through in looking at logs. 5 criteria. I want the center in the center, not off to one side. I want to see it round, not oblong, a different shape. I want to see it round. And I want to see about 1/8 of an inch a year per growth out through there. That knocks out 95% of them right there. You just, no. The last 2 things I look for, I look down the length of the log. And once a bump on a log, it's a knot, a branch. I don't want that. So that knocks out another 2 or 3% of them. Then I look at the bark, and I want straight bark. If the bark twists, the wood's going to do the same thing. And I can get by with 5 degrees and 12 feet. But after that, no. So I'm very particular when I look at my logs. The chairmaker's axiom here is we work pretty wood. And to work pretty wood, you got to find it. Life is too short to dance with ugly women or jerks. We work pretty wood. You get better quality furniture. It's just the way it is. You start with good materials, you're going to have good results. So, here's this log laying there. And I've already marked it for myself. I carry a blue rattle can, and I put LW on the end of it. That means it's mine when I do that. And the guy lifting the logs to the debarker with the big, huge forklift can't see the end of it. So I paint a stripe around it. So when he comes up to they're sawing oak for 2 or 3 days. They go through 500 logs. When he sees that one, he puts it aside. It doesn't go through the mill. I've reserved that for myself. And I'm going to pay a per footage basis, probably in the neighborhood of $150 to $200 for that log. However, I'm going to get at least 12 chairs out of it. At least. So, besides everything else, there's a whole bunch of numbers floating around in here, depending on the size of the chair that I'm making. The length of the posts, different size rungs, what I've got on order. So when I look at that log, I'm seeing 12 chairs sitting there done based on how I cut that up. So I cut that log up. There we go. Thank you. So I cut that log up to lengths, anywhere from 26 to 54-inch pieces out of 144 inch, 12-foot log, 144 inches. And I quarter it at the mill. Get that round piece and I quarter it. The length of the pieces I need. So there's a quarter of that log. 38, 40, 44 inches long, whatever. We then go through a process called riving. Show the froe. Riving is done with a froe and a mallet. And a froe is nothing more than a wedge with a handle. It's not for cutting or splitting, it's for splitting. It's like making firewood, but very accurately. Accurate firewood. So the first split is going to be right here. This is the heart. Oh, this is ridiculous. Okay. This is the heart right here. We don't use that part, and this is the sap. We don't use the sap. Yeah. So the second split may be here or here. Might split it here again. Possibly here. This ain't working.
What's the diameter of that log?
Good question, Eileen. The diameter of the log is between 15 and 24 inches at the small end. Below 15 inches, you lose too much in the curvature. Above 24, it's too heavy, too big to work, too big a piece.
Can you explain why you don't use the heart?
That's where the tree grew up. There's all kinds of little branches and knots and knurls in there. It's not good. You look out here, all these trees, they're all going like this till they get a certain diameter, and then they straighten out and go. The question is, why don't use the heart? It's not the best part of the tree. So,
So are you still using the same tool for that?
yeah,
So how do you use it?
I'm getting there. Eileen's a forward thinker. I'm getting there. Okay. What we work with here is the rings and the rays. Those are the growth rings. And going across those are what's called the medullary rays. Rings and rays. Think of it as being winter. And the tree is quick growing for the year. It's dormant, nothing's happening. And then the springtime comes, get a little rain, a little warm weather, and the cell, right here, I'm going to draw this here. Well, hang on to the thing right there. There's winter. Springtime comes. And the cells really expand quickly. And that's what you see as a growth ring. As things slow down, the cells get so close together, you can't see between them. Keeps growing. This is early, this is late in the season. And the rays are like this. So that is 1 year of growth. Every year. So, I cut this to length. I'm in the process of riving either on the rings or on the rays. This is on the rays, rings. So. These are the posts of the chair. The posts of the chair here. This is where the rungs come out, and this is where the backs come out. Okay? So theoretical chair making, if everything goes just fine and dandy, you can get 12 chairs out on one log.
And how long is the log? How long is the log?
12'6" usually.
How frequently do you actually get 12 chairs out of one log?
Almost every time.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Because what you get your post first, the longest, biggest piece. And then you start making the smaller pieces. There's a whole lot of drop that doesn't make posts, that makes rungs. If I've got a particularly good section I'm making backs out of, I'll make a whole bunch of backs at once. I think that's it. So we've rived these pieces out. There's no waste at all to rive parts out of a tree. No waste whatsoever. It's like making firewood. We're splitting the material. If you saw it out, there's a 1/4 inch of dust every time the saw goes through there. You never recover that. So our yield out of a log is about 85 to 90%. Excellent yield. Hand me that rung piece. This is a rung piece. Makes a rung. Come out right there. Something that was twice this size dimensionally will be a post. Okay? go ahead and get started. My grandson Will here will be making parts as we're talking about them. First thing you do is look at it and read it. The contraption he's sitting on is called a shaving horse. And the shaving horse was developed by Coopers in Europe several hundred years ago. And Coopers were the guys that made buckets and barrels and items of volume, contained volume. The Cooper was the most important guy in commerce. He made a volume. It contained volume. When they traded, they had volume. And that's how trade was accomplished. The tool he's using is called a draw knife. This particular one was made by the James Swan Company. It's a Swan draw knife. If you're out there looking at tools and you come across something that's got a swan, a little engraved swan, James Swan on there, you should buy it. If it's got any left at all, you should buy it because it's irreplaceable. Swan made great tools. They also were a study in humble. Etched right into each tool like that, stamped into it, was best tool steel. And you can't say that unless that's what you got. You know, it ain't bragging if you can back it up. So the Swan Corporation, they developed crucible steel, alloy steel, used it to make tools. Start again. Okay. It's pretty good. Pretty good. We have to look at it, you know. A little thick right here.
So he needs to be sitting sideways so we can see what he's doing.
Okay. Eileen, we'll do what you said.
Go, that's better.
There. And what we're doing here is a process of square, octagonal, round. When you see all these turn parts in chairs, different things, they started with a square. So when this is rived out, it's not a square. It's got slope to it. I'm thinking of the word and I can't come up with it. And the first thing you do is make it square. Then we'll knock the corners off that square and make it octagonal. And then we'll switch tools to a spoke shave. A rounded spoke shave will make it round. Pass that around and look at it. As you get that piece and look at it, feel the surface of the wood. We don't use sandpaper. We use edge tools. And edge tools make wood smoother than sandpaper. Edge tools are severing the fiber where sandpaper scratches it. We're not scratching. We're severing the fiber and shaving and making it very smooth. It's got smell. It's fresh out of the log. They're probably 3 months off the dry. We work the wood green, then we dry it, then we fit the chairs together. That one, probably about 70 or 80 years. That's good. Octagonalize that.
Do you have to sharpen them?
Good question. Good question. How often do you sharpen your tools? And the smart ass answers whenever they get dull. Okay, but I go through a process called hollow grinding. Regardless of the angle of attack, the back must be flat. You gotta flatten the back first. So you flatten the back, then you grind this concave surface. And after you grind the concave surface, you touch a honing stone to the top and bottom. And you create a micro bevel right here with a land in between. And as it gets dull, you go back to honing. And you keep honing until the grind disappears. Then you regrind. It takes me 20 to 30 seconds to sharpen when I'm honing. If it's not cutting like I want, zip, 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 and back to work. But the process of hollow grinding is important. Question?
Is the blade straight?
Yeah. No?
It's curved.
A little bit. Okay, where'd that piece get to you just made? Start that off to folks. There's square octagonal.
Smells fresh.
Some folks would think that it's got a little bit of a wang to it, and it does. I was demonstrated at the State Fair in Raleigh one time when I had some that had gotten a little overripe. The sugars in there had fermented, so it smelled like the cat had been in there. So I'm working at the fair, and the Sawyans would pile up. Folks would come out and start checking their boots. They look around like they stepped in something. And it was the fermentation of the sugars in the yolk. Just octagonalize one end and then go to round. So we go square to octagonal, that's what's going on in that one there, to round. The process for making the post is the same, just larger pieces. Square, octagonal, round.
Well, I have a question, sort of two questions. You obviously try to keep the same section of wood to that chair.
Yep.
Do you cut all of your pieces for like 4 chairs at one time, or just focus on the one chair?
Yes.
I understand.
We're always making rungs. When I'm demonstrating, I make a bunch of rungs demonstrating. They've got to be made first. If I've got pretty wood to make backs, I'm making a bunch of backs. When I'm making chairs, I'm pulling out posts for chairs. If I got 4 of them, I'll make 8 back posts and 8 front posts as I go along. But I'm always making the rungs first to get them dry. No, it does not warp as it dries. The question was, does it warp as it dries? No. I'm never crossing the grain. I'm following the grain all the time. So it has even ability to dry. When you see lumber that's sawn out of a log, there's the grain, here's the saw. And so lumber warps for uneven drying. And I'm exposing just the surfaces that are all together in that piece, so it does not warp, hopefully. But usually that's the whole theory behind it. Okay, where's the spoke shave? round one first. He's gone square to octagonal here. Square to octagonal. Now we're going to change tools to a spoke shave, a half round spoke shave. Where did that get its name? From shaving wagon spokes. Millions of them. It's a spoke shave. It's got a rounded blade, rounded sole, and it takes the flats and the facets off of the octagonal and makes it round. You can stop at octagonal, nothing says you can't. When to make a true mountain chair, you make them round. Just do one end and we'll pass that around. What he was doing there was going like this. You can feel a bump easier than you can see it. So you feel a bump, take it off, clean it up. And that's the process there is that your hands are telling you a whole lot about what you're making. So there is octagonal on one end, square on the, round on the other. Yep, the posts are made the same way. Made the same way. Now, this right here is a seat rung. A little bit of different shape to it. Quite a different shape. And it goes where the seat is. This is the rough piece to make that seat rung. Okay? Now this piece right here is a little different, but with just basically 3 tools in about 10 to 15 minutes through the shaving horse, and you create this shape. If you tried to make this shape today in a factory, it would be 5 machines in 3 days. Just because of the nature of what a machine will do. So the seat rung is very important. It carries the weight of the person sitting in it. It also lets the material for the bottom go off easy. Go off easy. So it's a wing rung, an air pole, whatever they want to call it. It's a seat rung. And there's 4 of them in every chair and 7 to 8 round rungs. And this one's dry, by the way. This is dry. When I nod, you come get the next piece.
Where does that go on the chair?
It's the rung, the seat rung,
So before that,
where the seat goes, at the top.
is that what's on that,
These are the seat rungs.
Is it wedged like that so that the material doesn't crack when you sit on it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And also carry the weight.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But those are the seat rungs and where they go in the chair. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Riding a shaving horse is a lot like rowing a boat. The more you pull with your hands, the more you're going to push with your feet. It's a very efficient way. All the shaving horse does is grip the material. It's a levered vise. It's the principle of the lever. Very simple. there's a whole lot more material below the head than there is above it, the pivot point, so that when you open it with your foot, you don't have to drag it open. It opens by itself. There are 2 or 3 different styles. This is called a dumb head. There was one that was called a bodger's pinch. And in England, especially Europe, the different over there were folks that lived in the woods and made chair parts and furniture parts. And they were called bodgers. And every so often, every 3 to 6 months, they would take all the parts they had to town and trade them off to a joiner, the guy that put the chair together. And they would purchase their things they needed to survive and go back to the woods. And they would, work on the tree the king said it could be cut. They were chair bodgers, B-O-D-G-E-R-S. This is a back for a chair. You might notice it's got some curvature to it. They're made at the same time the rungs are made. It's very green. Plane it down to about 1/4 of an inch thickness. Limber it up and put it in the bending jig. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks to dry and hold that curvature. Just natural air dry. About 2 to 3 weeks. Once they're dried and I decide which chair it's going into, I'll form it to that particular chair, put the tenon on the end, and that's where it is inserted into the post of the chair. It come out on the quarter so you can see the nice reflex in the piece. If you're familiar with quarter sawn lumber, this is the view that you get of the wood.
How do you get the bend in that?
Sir,
How do you get the bend?
you just limber it up and shove it in there. You just, it's really flexible. The question is how to get the bend in the piece. The wood is very flexible at that point. And you just limber it and slide it in the jig, opposing each other so that the center stays in the center. And that creates the back piece. What he's doing now is marking where the start and stop of that scallop is. Good job. Okay. All the chairs have a pattern. And these patterns have been generated over years. When I first started making chairs, they were too small because I copied some that were in museums. Folks were smaller back then. And I had to expand my dimensions to get to a contemporary size. Now all the chairs come from a pattern. That 3-slat chair there was made from this pattern. If I get an order for a set of chairs, I'm going to grab this pattern to make those chairs. And they'll be very similar to each other. Not exactly the same, but fairly similar. All the information to make that chair is on this stick. Every bit of it. The length of the posts, the length of the rungs, how many backs, where they go, where the rungs go, entry holes. We measure from the floor, not the ceiling. Measure everything off the floor. Like a story stick when you're putting in kitchen cabinets. This tells the story of that chair, how to make it. The relationship of the parts, where the tapers go, what kind of finial it's got. All the information for that chair is on there. Makes it very repeatable. I keep track of how many. In this chair, let's do some math here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 11 times 3 is 33. Times 5 is 165, and 4 more. There's 169 chairs have been made out of this pattern right here over the years. And they're all relatively the same chair. Well, I was hitting at that a while ago, Mary, but we're good. Yeah, octagonalize this in and round this in.
So having the pattern stored on a stick like that, is that something for chair making overall, or is that something specific to the region, or?
The question is it the pattern stick for chair makers overall? It's chair makers overall. To back up on that, Arville Woody made chairs in Spruce Pine, North Carolina, Woody's Chairs. And Arville took all of the heaviest labor out of making chairs. The first electric motor to hit Mitchell County is hooked to his lathe. You no longer stomp our foot and go zip and go. He had some adaptations to his lathe. He had what appeared to be a steady rest on the end. He would put the square in there, and it was round. Would make it round just like that. Then he would pick up a stick, and his were like that. They had hardened nails in them. It was a scratch stick. He would pick it up and go, and mark that piece where all that information is, all at once. You've seen old chairs with rings on, scratched rings on them? That's where that came from. If you look out here in the lobby where those chairs are hanging up, were some of the original chairs of the members of the guild originally. There are some Mace chairs out there. Shadrach Mace was a famous chair maker of the guild. There's some Woody chairs. There's yeah, well done. Good job. There were several chair makers. Randy Old's got one out there. But they were made chairs. Some of the first chairs were made by the makers of the guild, the woodworkers. Oh, thank you, Mary. I was getting wore out here. Well done, Will. Good job. So the assembly takes place. You get all the parts made. And the rungs have been dried, as dry as you can get them. 7% or below, as far as moisture content goes. The post is still a little bit wet, relatively speaking. 20, 25, maybe even 30% moisture content. When wood dries, it shrinks, gets smaller, keeps getting smaller, till it quits. So, we've got dry rungs and dry backs and wet posts. So we mortise it together, boring and mortise it together, chop the mortises, and it's a drive fit. When you put it together, it's boom, boom, boom. You're driving this chair together. And then the post shrinks on the rungs and will not let it go, ever. called swaging is the process. It's time honored, time tested, and is never wrong. Okay. So we got the rungs dry. I need to use for a second.
Oh, it does. But it's very integral into the next part. Do both ends. Okay. This tool right here is called a tenon cutter. Tenon cutter. Or specifically a hollow auger. And back when just started making these kind of tools, the hollow auger was used to make the tenon on the end of the rung, on the end of a spoke of